Hi, so we're going to see how well this works. My name is Sky. I am a aspiring writer, and uh, I am not a fan of magic. When I write stories, I just don't really think about it or like really want it in the environment. If I do whatever fan fiction stuff, like okay, and even then I'm like, okay, how can I exploit the trick or can I just get around whatever trick you got going on? And but like magic is as cool as neat. If you have it play out just right in the story, and every now and then, like, oh, okay, I got an idea for something magical, and like, okay, so, but then my mind is always, okay, so how does this play out? How do people experience this in the real world? It's that Deadpool, questioning or like, oh, could superheroes do this? Like, what is the limit, or are there limits? So to that end, this is so I thought like, oh, okay, when I become a famous author, why don't I turn to crowdsourcing my fans and say like, hey, how do what's a fantasy world and what can I do with it? But I realized like, well, I have to do it right now, through you guys, and the reason why I need help is because I realized just the way it can play out, the way things can go, it's almost a little too much. And so I could definitely use a crowd, hive mind to, yeah, just give me feedback and ideas. Uh, because in particular, I'm trying to establish uh, this idea and concept of this magic and what is this magic doing, and what are the rules that surround it. Like this would be so in a sense a magic system that would exist on a world, and how would it affect people? And um, it's the thing is that my science part of my brain is like, uh, yeah, you can only do so much when it comes to like, what can you alter on people? How can people grow? So, yeah, so like, it's hard for me to like get really creative and outside of whatever norm or whatever. Anyways, so what I'm presenting to you is my fantasy world and what I'm calling magic stones, um, for lack of a better term. And I'm trying to, because that's the other thing, I'm trying to figure out like a name and a concept for this fantasy world. So, because that's the other thing is that I'm leaning towards two different ways of how the magic and these stones are going to work on this world. So, anyways, to that end, um, so here's the outline of the topics that I'm going through, so that way I can help you jump through what's going on. The history, the magic stones themselves, magic stone locations, interactions with plants such as tree roots and fungi, um, interactions with animals, eating leaves, bark, sap, fruit, sea and river monsters, interactions with humans, elves, high elves, dwarves, gnomes, magic in hand, necromancy, magic outside of the stones. So I realized, okay, I got to write it out, and then put it online, make a video about it, and I want you guys' feedback. So these are because I realized, okay, what can you do? What can happen? What are all the different critters that are available, and how will the critters change and be different based off of the parameters that I'm presenting. Um, so the history. Normal world on the evolutionary path, one day half the world was hit with the debris from an explosion of some sort, way out in the cosmos, some other point in the universe, who knows. And the debris became known as magic stones. The possible origin is, parts of a dead god, parts of a dead titan, a magic user, so powerful he started consuming his own planet, and when he attempted to consume like the star, he exploded and the material is his body just like flung out across the universe, and so it's just trying to grow and like reform or who knows what. The magic stones. Conceivably, pieces the size of specks of dust fall to the planet, just implanting like projectiles or whatever into the ground. The stones grow in size very slowly. They have a metaphysical effect on the surrounding soil, pulling atoms and elements slowly through the rock and soil. And as time goes, the stones grow as the area of effect increases. 3. Magic stone locations. In the wild, stones are always found in the centers of hills and mountains. Either they like migrate or cause the soil and rock to grow around the stone itself. Just for whatever reason, the stones just like in their initial way when they come down to this planet. That's why I'm thinking like it's like an explosion, and so they just flung out across, and so this is the matter they hit. So they hit this planet. They hit bits and pieces, and into the rock, into the soil. In some cases, get down further, and if possible, or just the natural plate tectonics, mountains growing on top of each other or eroding away, what have you. But whenever you're looking for a stone or a possible location for a stone, if you just if you were walking along a flat piece of earth, and you notice like, hey, that's a tree, or that's a large hill, that's like seems to be like perfectly round. And it has like just really weird trees growing on it, and the animals around it are like you're just like monstrous. It's like, hey, that's there's power. Or that there's a power stone located there, a magic stone. So 4. Interactions with plants. Plants have a natural process of growth and life. If a tree root comes into proximity or touches, and how would that work? A stone, what happens? Question mark. So this is part of the reason why it's like my understanding of science and biology and chemistry is like, okay, I know so much, and then like, what about this? Well, what happens there? So I know it's where the fantasy is supposed to come in, but it's like I like science, really to back up a lot of my fantasy, and also just to give me ideas, because then it's like, well, so what happens? What could possibly conceivably happen here, beyond just things of unusual shapes and sizes. So tree roots. My thought process is scenario: a forest and a stone lands in the middle of a flat portion. Hill grows up around it. A nearby river eventually cuts into the side of the hill, eroding, making the rock fall apart because of the weight, and exposing the stone through erosion. A large tree on the top of the hill grows a root down and is able to come into contact with the stone, and from there the tree grows big and strong, and just redwood or bigger, or like what because who knows what sort of there's different breeds of trees and how they grow, and so whatever breed species of tree that would interact with the stone, it just becomes like the very large idea concept of that tree, and who knows, conceivably the whole. Because I'm not totally certain, how big is this hill that grows around just this random power stone that just happened to land there? Because depending on the environment, that's what's going to happen with the stone. So is what I'm thinking. The stones, the power stones seem to have some sort of consciousness or what have you about them. It's like, they're powerless to, like they had some idea of like, oh, there's a planet maybe, conceivably maybe, they're flying through space and avoiding going into the stars, avoiding ending up stuck in whatever thing because of whatever reason. See a planet, oh, aim for that planet, and just because of that, yeah, just happened to pepper one side of the planet, and depending on where they ended up, uh, like yeah, if it went for rock, like yeah, just try to go as deep as it could. If it was just like, well, here's a forest, just deep enough, and then yeah, just start doing its thing there. Anyways, back to this. Tree roots. The tree grows big and is dominating, and forest fires fizzle when they reach the base of the hill and the affected plant life. Fungi. So the fundamental feature of fungi is that it's one long cell with multiple nuclei inside of it, and as a result, it produces a spore out of that one cell. And what you're seeing is just the fungi is the collection of those cells. So that's why the symmetrical, cylindrical, what have you, shapes. So you have the erosion. You have cracks that would expose the stone. There's whatever power that is just feeding off of the stone, or the stone is given off and it's just drawing life to it, I think. And so it's going to draw on this fungi, and yeah, the fungi is just going to have two ends. One end connected to water, the other end to just growing ever closer to connect to the stone. So once it connects with the stone, what happens next? I almost want to say that the connection between the water and the stone is paramount to the survival of the fungi, and it's just because now, like once there's an interaction, well, I'll get into that later. Anyways, it becomes it grows like a vine, this thick, round thing, and it becomes filled with water. I'm thinking. So, interactions with animals. Oh, 5. Interaction with animals. So, eating leaves, bark, sap, and fruit. Scenario. A herd of elk finds an affected tree, eats some leaves and bark. They experience an immediate surge of adrenaline and euphoria. Conceivably, one leaf can sustain for a day. Consuming much, the elk grow in size. One may become an alpha leader, or they, may develop like a hive mind. They develop an extra ability, sensory, or increased intelligence. And it's a question like, so what happens in a desert, tundra, or jungle situation? If a predator can discover an herbivore that has consumed a piece of powered plant, I'll call it, it would experience the euphoria, adrenaline, sustainability, increase in intelligence. Conceivably, a wolf pack could come across the elk as they just encountered the power tree, and before the elk could become too strong, or they isolate one. It's like, because once the elk realize, hey, this tree's doing something to us, and we have this new thing, intelligence about us, awareness about our environment that we didn't have before, and awareness of each other. Like wolves, like, oh well, yeah, we're not afraid of wolves anymore. But if the wolves get them, before that, or if one of them gets isolated, and the wolves can grab that isolated one, and it's like now the wolves start gaining that power, that ability, and the the wolves, they come to understand the nature of the power tree, the herbivores, and how it affects them. Because they're the hunters, apex predators, in whatever case, it's they're going to be smarter, and the intelligence is going to grow. Uh, it's also conceivable that the wolves would wait till either the elk have either after calving, or after the mating season, and start killing off elk. So the question then is, would they kill the weaker males or the stronger males after the mating season had occurred? And because so this is an interesting idea, is because the animals are growing big and monstrous because of the food source. But if their whatever tendencies towards breeding, like what makes us bigger and stronger, more survivable, if that's taken out of the picture, what happens then? And that's where interesting abnormalities in genetics occur. So, because otherwise you just get if you're just breeding for strength and ability, you just get the same animal, just bigger and stronger and faster. But if you well, I don't want to breed for those traits, that's when you get okay. So you kill off the stronger males. That results in the weaker males developing genetic abnormalities or differences. The animals might be fatter, slower, have stunted legs, no antlers, poor vision, poor hearing, poor sense of smell, and they're still big. It's almost reminding me of Greek mythology of certain animals that you would hear described. So a pride of lions for a savanna setting, a lone great cat in a jungle setting. Sea and river monsters. This is where I need help because wait, what what could happen in the oceans. So scenario, a speck of stone hits the ocean, floats down on the floor. A sea scavenger, like a sea slug, a cucumber, what have you, absorbs the stone and is at some point consumed by another sea creature. And eventually an apex predator would get the stone in their bodies. So if a shark, it would grow incredibly large, and be able to challenge and eat whales. A giant, you can also have giant squid, giant octopus, crustacean. I'm kind of curious, what species? Because I'm thinking the mantis shrimp, which has little punching arms. Oh wait, what if that thing? Because it's supposed to be vicious, and it's there's those and some others just really sharp, whatever. What if one of those critters got this thing that just made them grow crazy huge? A giant sea tortoise that slowly swims through the oceans, eating kelp forests. Its jaws so big and strong it can bite through stone and iron. Dolphin, orca, an oyster consumes a stone and it grows like a pearl within it. The oyster becomes monstrous and it opens up and is able to just suck so much water in its body or something. And, large rivers would be subject to predators roaming up and down them. So if depending on its size, whatever the critter was, the sea creature, monster, swim up it, but also crocodiles, hippopotamus, salamander, frogs. At some point, because the erosion, the other thing is what I keep thinking as well, somehow or other, one of these power stones as a speck just ends up in the river and starts working its way down the river. And, but it's also because the animals are going to fight each other. These monsters animals would encounter and fight each other and rip each other apart, or who knows, and the stone ends up going around, migrating to somebody else, who knows. Or whatever other critters that scavenge off of the flesh of the. It was like oh, God. Anyways, uh, the it's such a weird concept. I'm just like playing around with, like, that's why it blows me away. Okay, 6 interactions with humans. Elves, high elves. The scenario I have is humans find a power tree in the forest. They think it's a god, and they realize, like, eat the leaves and whatever else of it. It makes them strong, fast, heal better, euphoric. They grow large. They live longer. They're skinny. And I realize now, like, yeah, the wood from the tree. Would they be able to get the wood off the tree? Or what if it was a tree that shed its bark each season or each year? See, like, it's just too much information for me to, like, just, anyways. But with the sap of the tree too, what could he do with it? Oh man. The high elves. So if you have a power stone up in the mountains, and there's certain high forests up in the mountains, uh, so the people, they find a power tree and they just they live exclusively off the power tree. So my idea of the elves is that whatever environment they come across, the power tree, they realize, okay, we can live off this thing. It does amazing stuff to. It's amazing to us. It changes us. We're different because of this tree, and we worship this tree as a god, or who knows what. All they know is, like, yeah, just treat the tree and the animals around it like a certain way, and yeah, that's it. And so they still consume regular, whatever, the products of the forest. The high elves, they're living way up in the forest or up in the mountains, conceivably, where there's really not much they can eat, and so they're really just living off the tree. Just whatever they can consume off of it, and as a result, the very gaunt, also growing large, and they would appear frail, but still be very strong. Dwarves. Scenario. Mining exposes a stone in the rock. The miners leave the stone and begin clearing away out the space around the stone. The stone gives off a light and a feeling of energy. So it's this warm, euphoric feeling that these people experience. It's a drug experience for them, because it's the stone is in living rock, is my idea, the thing I'm just, like, struck by, and it's, if they leave it there, it has this effect because it just fills everything around it, and it affects them. They realize, like, we can just stare at this thing and just feel like you're in the presence of a god. So they would come to worship it, and become like addicts to it. So they start carving out the rock around the stone, leaving it in place, and so they form like a sort of rock spire, stalagmite, stalactite situation, in terms of like this huge gallery, this huge open cavern. That this is like the ultimate dwarf city if they could, but they would be up in the mountains, and or like some huge mountain ranges. Like, they find a stone, like all right, we leave it there and just carve out the rock from around it, and just so they have a huge open space that they can stand to absorb and just be in the presence of the stone. And then from there, just carve tunnels out for their dwellings and whatever community use rooms. Because they realize, like, well, okay, we just we go someplace to sleep, we have our food, we go up to the surface to get supplies, But otherwise, no, we're down with worshiping the stone. And the, conceivably, uh, yeah, they could have like, because they would treat it as a god. You'd have a person who acts as a leader slash priest, maybe, of, these dwarves, these, this sort of, cult like, group of people. And they control access to the stone, or access to the presence of the stone. And that's the other reason why they would just have it at this. You would carve, you would leave it in place and just carve away the stone away from it, and that way, like, you couldn't climb up to get it, you couldn't take it away, and like, nor would you want to. You'd want it there. And the interesting side effect of that is the so the stone just becomes powerful and it continues to grow, like, emitting light and power. You just feel more just like, oh, yeah, whatever about it. And conceivably, you touch a stone, like, in that spire underneath it, you're like, ah, you're connecting with your god. The stone makes the rock grow around it. So even though the dwarves are carving away the stone all around this thing, around the stone itself, material is growing, which whatever can be loose, and it just grows strong and thick and adds to the material of the stone. And then everything around it, all the other stone just seems to grow. Like, just stone comes to it and grows around it. If there's cracks in stone, the crack eventually goes away. It fills in. Two stones on top of each other, they eventually meld together. If, like, they're close enough in whatever proximity. So as a result, you can construct and then, like, well, build an arch, and then eventually the arch comes together. Becomes stronger. The gnomes. So, scenario. A dwarf community has mined out an extensive complex. A family has used one tunnel as a home, and a crack in the rock allows a toddler or young child to crawl through and find a fissure in the rock. They crawl through a narrow opening, a narrow open space, and find a stone exposed by the crack in the rock of the mountain. So the natural erosion process, or underground waterways, whatever would happen would eventually, in some cases, it's just going to crack the rock, or crack mountains inside, and that would just leave an open enough space they could get to the stone, the power stone, and the magic stone, touch it. So for the gnome, the stone would be so enticing that the child would approach and touch and lick the stone. Doing so, the tongue of the child is coated with a dust or residue that the stone gives off, along with the minerals that circulate towards and grow around the stone. This stunts the growth of the child, keeping them small. They age. Their heads grow to adult size. They wear no clothes or use tools. They grow incredibly strong and develop fingers and fingernails that can scratch into rock. They can slowly burrow through rock. They drink from underground pools, eat tree roots and fungi, maybe also bats and birds that fly into caves. They're really good at throwing stones and stalactites as darts. They do not reproduce